Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. I hope you are very well. Today's episode is going to be all about the 5 things that I find hard or challenging in business. And I thought I'd share these because I think people are nosy and they want to know. And I also think there's a lot of learning in it and, useful for people listening. So here we go. I'm going to try and make this as quick as possible. And I'd be interested to know what your 5 things that you find hard in business are. So whether that's you want to make a podcast episode yourself, or whether you want to write that on Instagram stories, or whether you want to create a blog post about it or a video, feel free to tag me in it. I'd love to read yours. I think it's really interesting for everyone to hear what it is specifically that people find hard and challenging. So, number 1, and these are not in any particular order, but when I was thinking about this, the first thing that popped into my head was network. So I find lack of network really challenging. And when I say that, I don't mean volume of people. What I mean is the quality or specific people or groups of people. Network is really hard. It's one of these things in business that's not spoken about enough. The impact of having a strong network isn't talked about enough. It is, massively the difference between people who come from various different walks of life and what they're able to do in business. And so for me, the lack of network thing is massive. For those of you who don't know my journey, I started my businesses and, I didn't know anyone in business. I don't come from like a family of entrepreneurs. That's not something that, I was open and exposed to. And so I really started from the ground at the bottom of literally knowing very few people and kind of really working out what that means. I think lack of network also really sits, I'm obviously based in the UK and I travel to London quite a lot, and I really see the difference there, okay, in terms of like, if you live in London, it's a whole different ballgame to if you don't. And I live in the northeast of England, between Durham and Newcastle. And it's very different here. And I'm not saying there isn't an amazing network here. There is, and I definitely don't tap into it enough. But what I mean is in terms of if you live in London and you're in London and you can get to London, I think there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of things that you can kind of get involved with that really helps this and has come a long, long way. I get invited to things, which is really lovely. And, I attend some, but a lot of things I can't because of my chronic illness, which I'm sure we're going to come on to. But yeah, I just think the lack of network thing's really massive. Also, in amongst that is also the not having a co-founder thing. So I chose, neither of my businesses have a co-founder. I am solely the joint owner. But I do feel that there are huge benefits to having a co-founder. And there's also negatives, of course. But, having a co-founder is a really nice relationship. I really do believe that when people get it right, it really helps to massively scale a business. Not that's particularly what is on my agenda right now, but it's just interesting. And I think that relationship of having a business partner and having a co-founder is a lovely one. And yes, it's hard, and yes, it takes a lot of hard work. But I think if you can find someone who really gel and you really love, to put it bluntly, it works fantastically. And I work with business partners and people who have co-founders and multiple directors who are really kind of interlinked. And it's beautiful to watch that relationship. It's so lovely to see what that does for people, which is really great. So that is number 1. Number 2 is my chronic illness and energy, and more specifically energy. So the thing I find hardest in business is, because of my chronic illness and because of how, my day-to-day is, I have to really be careful. I have to say no to lots of things, and it's really frustrating and difficult. I want to do all the things. I want to go to this thing and go to that thing and help this person and say yes to this and do this client thing and have X amount of clients. And, the reality of it is I can't do it all. And I had to accept that a long time ago, but it's still hard. It's still hard. And it would be wrong of me to say that it isn't, because especially when opportunities come up, and sometimes I have to say no, and I have to get really clear on, well, is it a paid opportunity? Is it not? Is it, what is the impact of X thing? What is it going to mean? Have I got to travel? Have I got to do this? And, that's not to say I won't do them, because I do a lot of things, but just that initial thing of, if I had a body that wasn't chronically ill, how much more would I be able to do? I'd never still be able to do everything, because we all, no one can, but there is this always there of like, oh, okay, great, this is something we're kind of stuck with and that I have to deal with. And more so from an energy perspective is what the issue is. I wish I could just bottle up energy, and I wish I could create energy, and I'd be a very, successful person if I could do that, because I think we're all trying to work out how to do that. And whilst, there's shortcuts and there's things that you can do in terms of a long-term solution, it's very limited, and that's hard, and it's something that you grapple with a lot. And I know for those of you who listen who are also chronically ill, it's frustrating and it's challenging and it's kind of nuanced and it's difficult. But yes, that is my number two. Sort of the chronic illness and the energy thing I find extremely hard. And it's also given me a lot of benefits, and I'm never sort of resentful of it, although I may sound like it. It makes me live in a way that is sustainable, and it makes me live in a way that is balanced. But it does from time to time become quite frustrating. Number 3 of the 5 things that I find hard in business is something that's not talked about a lot, but I think a lot of people will relate to this. So there is a thing in business that I refer to as body dysmorphia, but it's actually called business success dysmorphia. And this is really difficult. And this is something that I've struggled with and I find hard, and I still from time to time feel like really out of whack with. And that is the whole idea and concept of your business can be at a point that you have no clue or recollection of what it is, and you perceive it to be something that other people do not perceive it to be. As in, your business, most likely what this looks like is your business is much further ahead than you perceive it to be, or your brand is much more developed than you think it is, or you don't understand the full impact and scope of what your day-to-day work is having for people. Body dysmorphia, business success dysmorphia is something that I see with clients a lot, but it's also something I really sort of see in myself, and see, sometimes it can be years down the line and you're like, oh goodness, I realize that now, or I see that, or I see how mainly just how much better things are than you think they are. And I think that comes from hearing external opinion, it comes from getting feedback, it comes from you looking at data and really diving into analytics and understanding what is, the numbers don't lie, so to speak. But it's hard. And I think the reason that that's hard is because people make decisions in business based upon what they believe to be true. But often our perception of what is true is stunted and is kind of glazed over by the fact of whatever we believe in our head, which is not necessarily the same thing. And I think that's something that people have to grapple with and understand and kind of work out, because you can do a lot of damage to a business. And I've seen this happen where I view a business to be one thing and a client can only see it to a certain point, and therefore they make decisions that are not the right decision, or in my opinion aren't. There's always an argument that is anything the right decision. However, in terms of they make a decision of where the business was 6 months ago, even though the business is not where that was 6 months ago, and it's completely different, status. And that often happens with fast growth, and it happens with kind of change, and it happens when, it takes time to catch up with things. I think that's the other thing that's hard. It's like, often many of us takes us time to process and takes us time to bed into where we're at. But if your business is moving at a point where actually it doesn't have time to bed in, and it's moving at a fast pace and a scale in which a lot of the people I work with, they are, then that becomes kind of difficult. And this dysmorphia comes in of this business success, of understanding where you're at. Now, I don't see that as a real negative. It's not a crisis thing. It's not oh my goodness, this is so bad. It's just being aware of it. And I am very aware of it in the sense of, before I make a really strong decision in the business, whichever business it is, I will check in and say, hang on, right, okay, where are we at? And is it from a data perspective, or is this in your head of what you're perceiving things to be? Because sometimes those two are not aligned. Sometimes they are, but there's also, this idea that it isn't. A word of warning here, and a note for people that might be helpful, is that actually you can have this business success dysmorphia the other way. So it can be that you think your business is way further ahead than it actually is. And I see this a lot with online businesses. And people who grow quite a big audience or create loads of content, and they, get a lot of external validation, a lot of noise. But often that's not the same as how structurally sound your business is, or it's not the same as how grounded your business is in terms of the foundations of, is it set up for success long term? And so people then get a kind of false sense of security around, I'm so successful. And actually that is dysmorphia in itself, in the sense of it's not clear for people, if other people on the outside are thinking, hang on a minute, like this does not look what, what people are perceiving it to be, or what the facts look like. So there's kind of an interesting thing there that, you might fall on either side of that or relate to neither of it. But I think it's an interesting concept, and it's something that definitely I find hard in business, and it's something that I consciously work on to make sure that I'm kind of up to speed with. And, having external support with that is really key. Ultimately, perspective is what we're talking about here, is perspective and perception and depth. And that comes from your leadership progressing, it comes from your emotional intelligence, it comes from your cognitive ability to process. There's a lot of things that come into that, but I thought I'd share that because I think it's an interesting thing that not many people talk about. Number 4 is speed of decision making. So one of the things I find really hard in business is making a decision fast. Now, I would say for me, decision making is one of the most challenging skill sets that I have had to learn, that I'm still learning, that I constantly am refining, because it is hard. So I am, for context for anyone listening, a recovering perfectionist who had to have clinical support and help for that. Like, not just talking like, oh, it was really difficult. Like, I'm talking I had to have full intervention for it. Horrific anxiety, all sorts of a host of things, which meant that my cognitive processing in terms of decision making was completely shot, and was completely so far out of the window that you couldn't sort of rein it in. And that was, how many years ago? 12 years ago, 13 years ago, a long, long time ago. But I still grapple and deal with the side effects of that. And one of them is this thing that I continuously work on about decision making. And as I've said before, businesses thrive, and the success of them relies on the person making decisions, and it relies on what is the quality of that decision, and are people willing to go there and make the wrong decision and then just fix it afterwards, because that's ultimately what we have to do. Sometimes, obviously, we always want to make the right decision. The reality of it is sometimes you're not going to make the right decision, and that's okay. But making the wrong decision at speed when it needs to be is better than not making a decision at all a lot of the time. And so one of the things I find hard is this idea that sometimes you've got to make a decision. Sometimes I'm in a meeting and I have to make a decision there and then. Do I want to go and sit and think about it? Yeah. Do I want to go and sit and hum and haw over it? Yes. Do I want to go and look at the data? Yes. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes we've got to make a decision. Now, that's rare. I'm not saying that's all the time. But I think it's important to talk about this, because I see people sit on decisions for weeks or months or years, and it's too long, and people needed to make the decision in the moment, in the minute, in the hour, in the day. Now, obviously, when it comes to decision making, ideally, I like to sleep on something. So if it's something big, my general motto is, why can't we sleep on something? Most of the time we can. So it's like, let's sleep on it. Here's the options, and then see how I feel. However, and that can still feel fast, right? Sometimes that's fast, and I have to ask clients this. I have to say, like, okay, these are your options. Go and think about it. Get back to me tomorrow. This is what, we need an answer. And that can feel too soon for people. It can feel too soon for me. But part of the journey of scaling a business, and part of the understanding of how are you going to grow, and how do you scale, for those of you who want to scale at speed and scale well, the decision-making things, like, I'd say a massive, huge part. It's one of the biggest key components of that. And it's okay if you struggle with it. And it's okay if you find that challenging. And it's okay if you feel like, oh, every single day I've just got to make decisions. Obviously, that's why we have processes. Obviously, that's why we have systems. Obviously, that's why we have management. Obviously, that's why we have so many operational things in a business, which will reduce the amount of decision making you have to take, which is really good, because, it's frustrating when you've got to sort of, the more decisions you have to make in a day, the harder the day becomes. So there's a lot of decisions that you can standardize and, automating things in a business. And that's really key, because you don't want to be spending your time trying to make decisions on those small things. You want to just be making decisions on the bigger things. But even at that point, it's still challenging. And that's why I'm sat here today saying, look, it's okay if you struggle with the speed of decision making, because I also do. And it's something that, some people will listen to this and argue, well, it's good that you take a while to make a decision, or it's good that you don't want to jump to a decision within like 5 minutes. But the reality of it is depending on what goal you're going after, the difference between a solid high performer and a really strong business owner, and then someone who kind of half is in and half is out, or is not as sort of acute in how they can scale with such purpose. It comes down to this, and it comes down to the decision making, or one of 4 items, and one of those being the decision making. So, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I apologise if my voice is somewhat croaky and a bit husky. I am not well and haven't been well for weeks, but I decided that you'd rather have a podcast episode than not, and so therefore that is why I'm recording with this voice. Number 5 of the 5 things that I find hard in business. This one is quite specific to what I do, but I know some of you listen also, and many of you listen, are helping other people with their businesses, and so you will relate to this. So number 5 of the things I find hard in business is not intervening and pushing people to build bigger businesses than they want, which is difficult, okay? So what I mean by that is a business can come to me, they're already normally successful, they're already, doing great things. And I look at the business, and for context for those people who don't know, sort of what I do, when a client comes to me who wants to work with me one-on-one in a consultant container, I essentially am integrated into their business. I'm not, necessarily a team member, although some people, that's what they see me as. But I'm in there, I understand, I look through P&Ls, I understand where the business directions go, and, I can, sometimes I'm working with team members, like there's a lot, I'm very much integrated into a business. I therefore see massive opportunity or massive potential, or I can see kind of what I would do with the business, which is not what I'm necessarily contracted to do. And therefore, obviously, that is not what I get given. Sometimes people do contract me on the basis of they want to know what I would do, and that's fine. But I can see something, right? And sometimes the vision that I see is a lot bigger than the vision that they have for themselves. And sometimes that's hard because I'm like, I just want to make it happen. I want to invest. I want to partner with them. I want to help them make it huge. I want to sort it all for them. I want to sort it all out. There's this real kind of yearn to go there and to help people. And obviously that isn't, part of what I've just described there is not my job. And therefore, obviously it doesn't happen. But I'm being very open and honest in the sense of telling you that sometimes I come across a business and I think, oh my goodness, like this could be a £10 million a year business or £100 million a year business, or actually it could go and completely change the landscape in X, Y, and Z sector, or, this industry would so benefit from it. And, the founder doesn't want to do that, or they're not interested. And sometimes, most of the time, I'm not even going to say that. I will, if there's something that's there and they ask, which inevitably it does come up to some degree of, well, what's your vision? What do you see? And they might say to me, well, what do you see? And I will be open and honest, but it's not something I'm ever going to go into and be like, right, I think you should do X, Y, and Z thing. And it doesn't matter if you don't like it, because that's what we're doing. Like, obviously that does not happen. But I find that hard because, I spend time with incredible, amazing, beautiful human beings who are doing fantastic things in the world, helping people, helping others, helping the planet, doing amazing things. And because I am a visionary and because I can see what other people can't see sometimes, there's a huge part of me that's like, right, let's go. Let's partner up, let's invest, let's do this, let's do that. And, that's what makes me good at my job, because at the end of the day, when I go into people's businesses, I'm not invested in them. I don't have an equity share. They pay a flat fee. I don't take any kind of rewards, bonus or anything. And I go in and I, really deliver a strong execution of whatever we're doing. And that's right, that's right that is the way it is. But it's also interesting because sometimes I will sit on an evening and, go through my day and think, oh, right, okay, it's such a shame that they don't want to do that. And it's not a shame. When I say that, I don't mean that it's a shame, because it's not. Everyone can have whatever business they want to have. There's no right or wrong as to what size or shape or how it looks or who it should impact at all. However, it would be disingenuous for me to say that I don't sometimes find a business and think, you have got something really special here and you should really go for it. And it's not with every client, and that's not to say that, that's wrong. It's just that some people have a specific business where I can see, like, goodness me, if I spent 10 hours a week in your business, or 20 hours or 30 hours, what could actually happen here, and the potential in it. So it's really interesting. So those were the 5 things that I find hard in business. I'm going to just recap them now. I'd love to know, as I mentioned at the start of the episode, what your 5 things are. But just to recap, we had number 1 was lack of network and not having a co-founder. Number 2 was around chronic illness and energy and wishing that I could bottle up energy and create energy. Number 3 was business success dysmorphia, which is around how you can have body dysmorphia, but almost in a business context, and that's really difficult. Number 4 was around decision making and the speed of decision making. And number 5 was not intervening and pushing people to build bigger businesses than they want when I can see massive potential and want to just invest and partner with them in their business. So those are the 5 things that I find hard. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I know it's a shorter episode than somewhat, sometimes that I do. Let me know if you like a shorter episode. I know sometimes if you're busy, maybe it's a better one. But yes, sending lots of love. I hope you are all well, and I look forward to speaking to you next week. Bye.